Welcome, students. Today we are dealing with topic 15, the labor market. Um, for this day today. So topic 15, the labor market. We've dealt with the factor market and the goods market, and in previous learning units, we dealt with the circular flow of income and spending. We dealt with the goods market and the factor market, and we looked at all the factors of production, which includes labor. Now, topic 15 is about the labor market. So in this learning unit, we will look at the supply and demand in a perfectly competitive labor market. So very important, we look at a perfectly competitive labor market. Although in the real world, we have an imperfect labor market. And then we will also look at the imposition of a minimum wage in a perfectly competitive labor market. Minimum wage is a very relevant topic in the South African context, in the labor market, especially with the implementation of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act after 94. So, and to have a living wage for people in the country, for the working population. So this is the learning outcomes of this topic 15. What you must do first when you start the topic, you must first go to the portal, the ECS 1501-24Y portal, and you look at what is being discussed there on the portal site in terms of the learning outcomes, etc., and which we will cover in the slides. The slides is also available under additional resources, the slides for this topic 15. So yeah, we will, in terms of the labor market, we will use demand and supply analysis, as we have done with the goods market. So now we're dealing with the factor market, and specifically the labor market as a factor market. So we will use demand and supply analysis, which we have done already at the beginning. Demand and supply to determine the equilibrium wage and the equilibrium number of workers. Now, to start, we have to deal with the individual's firm demand for labor, and then we will continue until the market demand for labor. So the most important aspect of the demand for labor is that it is a derived demand. So what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of a derived demand? Firms will only demand and employ labor if there's a supply for labor for their goods and services, and if it's profitable to do so. So it means that no firm will demand labor or workers if there's no demand for their goods in the goods and services market. Right, so and profitable. It must be profitable. So it's a derived demand. So it means it depends on the type of sector. In some sectors, more, and industries, more labor is demanded, more labor intensive, like factories, where workers have to do the work and not less machinery. So labor intensive, for example, in the agricultural sector, more labor will be employed because it's more labor intensive than capital intensive. So it's a derived demand. That is very important. So the demand for labor is a derived demand. It's derived from something. So firms will only demand and employ labor if there's a supply for their goods. There won't be any production of goods and services if there's no demand for their goods and services. And then only then will labor be demanded and employed by firms to produce that goods and services. And profitably, it must be profitable. Otherwise, why will you be in business? So very important, you will only employ enough labor which is cost effective, efficient, and productive. And that is very important in the South African context because in the recent past, we have high unemployment rates, which is not good for the economy from a macroeconomic perspective. So, so it's a derived demand from a microeconomic perspective. We're dealing at the moment with microeconomics. Now, in terms of the individual's firm demand for labor, as long as the marginal benefit exceed the marginal cost of labor, the firm will continue producing additional units of labor, or not producing, but employing additional units of labor. So this is the new concepts. We know what is marginal. Marginal means additional. So it means that you have dealt with marginal in terms of marginal utility. So marginal is a very important concept in economics. It means additional. So as long as the additional benefit exceed the additional cost of employing more labor, additional units of labor, one additional unit of labor, one worker additional, then the firm will then employ labor. That is very important. The marginal benefits must always exceed the marginal cost. So the marginal cost we refer to the cost of labor, and the cost of labor is the wage. The price of labor is wages. It's different from the goods market. In terms of the goods market, you have demand for goods and services and the supply of goods and services, and you get the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity of when the market is in equilibrium. So that is in terms of the goods market. So as long as the marginal benefit exceed the marginal cost, then the firm will continue employing labor, additional units of labor, one labor, additional unit of labor. And this will continue until the marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. If the marginal benefit is less than the marginal cost of employing an additional unit of labor, one worker additional, then the firm will not employ that additional unit of labor. It will not be cost effective. It will not be profitably for that firm. So that is then a very important principle in terms of an individual's firm demand for labor, and where it differs from the goods market, which we have dealt with in previous learning units. So thus we have to consider the determinants of the marginal cost of labor, MCL, and the marginal benefits of labor. So that is very important. So it's new concepts that is being introduced in this learning unit is the MCL and the marginal benefits of labor and the derived demand. So let's look at an individual's firm demand for labor in terms of this slide. What is then the two components of the marginal benefit of labor? It consists of two things, the physical productivity of labor and the marginal revenue. Now, what is the physical productivity of labor? You will also find it in the notes, on the additional notes on the portal site, on the module site, and in the on that learning outcomes and in the introduction. So the physical productivity of labor is actually, it refers to what is the additional productivity that an additional unit of labor will add to the total output of the firm. So it's in terms of the total output, the TP, total product of the firm. So that is the physical productivity of labor. And then it also consists of the marginal revenue. So that are the two components of the marginal benefit of labor. It refers to the additional physical productivity of labor. What is that additional unit of labor providing to the total product of the output of the firm? And what does it, that additional unit of labor, does it provide to the marginal revenue, the additional revenue that it contributes to the firm? So the firm's marginal revenue is equal to the price of the product, Learning Unit 13, and the firm will continue to employ labor as long as the employment of each additional unit adds more to the total revenue than its total cost. So as long as the marginal benefit exceeds the marginal cost, then firms will do what? Then they will employ more labor. They will demand more labor, more additional units of labor. So the firm's marginal revenue is equal to the price of the product, price P, and the firm will continue to employ labor as long as the employment of each additional unit adds more to its total revenue than its total cost. So the following condition must be met. Marginal benefit must exceed marginal cost. Then you have to remember the law of diminishing marginal returns. Remember in the case of the law of diminishing marginal returns, what happens in the case of the labor market? It implies that the marginal product of labor has a declining tendency. So when you go back to the law of diminishing marginal returns, which we have dealt with in the previous learning units, total product will decline as more labor is being employed. So in the case of the labor market, it implies that the marginal product of labor has a declining tendency. As more units of the variable factor of production labor is added to the fixed quantities of the other factors, natural resources, entrepreneurship, and capital, the additional output generated by the employment of each additional unit of labor decreases. So the law of diminishing marginal returns can also be applied to the labor market as in the goods market. So what does it mean? The marginal product of labor has a declining tendency. So it means that as you employ more units of the variable factor, that is labor, we assume labor is the variable factor, and you add it to the fixed quantities of the other factors of production, natural resources, entrepreneurship, and capital, the additional output to total product generated by the employment of that additional unit of labor will decrease. So the law of diminishing marginal returns is also applicable to the labor market. So what happens is it will increase initially but from a certain point, diminishing marginal returns will set in. And then marginal product will decline. It will reach a maximum and then it will decline. Now, you remember that two components that we refer to, if you go back to that slide, the two components of the marginal benefit of labor: physical productivity of labor and marginal revenue. Now, if you look at this slide, we refer to the marginal product of labor as the marginal physical product of labor, the MPP. So we have the MCL and the MPP. So what does the MCL indicates? The physical value to the firm of employing an additional unit of labor. So you won't employ an additional unit of labor, one additional unit of labor, if it won't benefit the firm. If it will not add to the marginal benefit of labor, because you will employ additional units of labor as long as the marginal benefit of labor exceeds the marginal cost of labor. That means the marginal cost of labor is the wage rate, the price of labor. So that is very important to distinguish it from the goods market. At first year level, you will only deal with the basics of the labor market, the foundations of the labor market. In the second year, third year, you will go into more detail into the labor market and honest level. Now, to determine the increase in total revenue of the firm as a result of the employment of an additional unit of labor, how do you calculate that? The MPP must be multiplied by the marginal revenue, the MR. Now, the marginal revenue is always equal to the price. The price is not the price of the goods or service, it's the price of labor. And the price of labor is the wage rate. So the MPP has to be multiplied by the marginal revenue to determine the increase in total revenue as a result of the employment of an additional unit of labor. So to calculate that, you will get then the MRP, which is the MPP times the MR. Now, remember, we're dealing with a perfectly competitive labor market. So we assume that there are many firms. That is very important. So for a perfectly competitive firm, MR is always equal to P. Thus, MRP is equal to MPP times MR, which is then MPP times P, because MR is always equal to P in a perfectly competitive labor market. It's the same in the case of a perfectly competitive goods market, where the marginal revenue is equal to the price of the goods and service and is equal to average revenue. But here we deal with the labor market, which is a specific market, which is a factor market. And it's a very important labor market, factor market, specifically in the South African macroeconomic context, where we have high unemployment rates. So employing additional workers will only be profitable if the benefit to the firm, the marginal revenue product, is greater than the marginal cost of labor, which is the wage rate. So the MRP must always be bigger than the MCL. Then you can employ additional units of labor. Then it's profitable. Then it's more cost effective. Then it's efficient. Otherwise, workers will stand in each other's way. And that will create low productivity and less efficiency. And firms cannot, in the current economic environment, firms cannot afford that, especially in very competitive markets. If MRP is less than the wage rate, the marginal cost will exceed the marginal benefit and is therefore not profitable to employ additional workers. So that is just the opposite. And then when is equilibrium reached in the labor market? Equilibrium in the goods market is reached when what? When the quantity supply is equal to the quantity demanded of goods and services at equilibrium price, at equilibrium quantity, when the market is cleared. In the labor market, equilibrium is achieved when the marginal benefit is equal to the marginal cost. So when the marginal revenue product is equal to the wage rate, which is the marginal cost of labor. So that is important when equilibrium is reached in the labor market, which is different from the goods market. Now, we're still busy with an individual firm's demand for labor. We have to discuss this in detail before we can continue to the market demand for labor and the supply of labor and to the equilibrium in the labor market. So an individual firm demand for labor, how will this decision be reached? An individual firm have to decide how many workers he will hire or employ, given the information below. This is just a hypothetical example. So here John has to decide how many workers he will hire, given the information below. So the number of workers in the first column, N, this is the symbol to denote number of workers. Then total physical product, number of shirts a week that are being produced. When there's 0 workers, 0 shirts are being produced. And the marginal physical product, the MPP, number of shirts per week, will also then be 0. When 1 worker are employed, 10 shirts are being produced. That is the total output, the TP. And then the marginal physical product will be 10. Now, marginal means additional. So from 0 to 10 means that if you employ 1 additional worker, the total output will increase from 0 to 10. So the marginal physical product will then be 10. The difference between these 2 columns. If you employ a second worker, the total product, 18 shirts will be produced, the TP. So what is then the MPP for the second worker? It will be 8, means from 10 to 18. So if you employ a second worker, 8 additional shirts are being produced. And so you can go on. And you can work through that table. Right? Now, the marginal revenue product, that is the other column that you have. How do you get to the marginal revenue product? That is your MRP. You calculate what? Oh, this is just been given there. 0, 500, 400, and then 300 and 200 and 100. So remember, how is your marginal revenue product being calculated? The MRP, your MRP is equal to the wage rate. Okay, so this is given to you. So this is the MRP, is equal to the wage rate. This 500, 400, 300, and 200 and 100. This is hypothetical. Right now, let's go then to this section. So you have now the number of workers, total physical product, the marginal physical product, the price per shirt, and the marginal revenue product, and which is actually the wage rate, the marginal cost of labor. So the price per shirt is given to you. It's a fixed price, 50 Rand per shirt. So if the equilibrium wage rate is 200, how many workers does Peter have to hire in order to maximize his profit? So this information in the this last two columns will be given to you, right? In this example, sometimes you have to calculate it from information given to you in the assessment. So if the equilibrium wage rate is 200, you can see here 4 workers are being employed. The total physical product is 28. The marginal physical product is 4. The price per shirt is 50. The marginal revenue product, which is the wage rate, it's 200. Now the question is, how many workers will Peter hire or employ to maximize his profit? So that is the MRP, is the wage rate, 200 per week. So how many workers? You see, 4 workers. So you will employ 4 workers. If the wage rate, the marginal revenue product, or the marginal cost of labor is 200, then you will employ 4 workers to maximize his profit in a perfectly competitive labor market. So this is how you will read it from a given table. So this is very important. So you can look at if the wage rate is maybe 300, how many workers will Peter employ to maximize his profit? 3 workers. If the wage rate per week is 400, 400 per hour, for example, hypothetically, then 2 workers will be employed to maximize his profit. And 1 worker, the wage rate is 500 rands per week. Rands per week. Then you will employ 1 worker. So if Peter hires fewer workers, it means that the firm can still increase its profit by hiring more workers. So here you can see you can hire more workers here because the marginal revenue product is greater than the wage rate. If he hires, he will be making a loss. Right. If Peter hires fewer workers, it means that the firm can still increase its profit by hiring more workers. So this is important. Right. So just to repeat that, just apology for the announcement. If MRP is greater than the W, the wage rate, then he can employ more workers. If MRP is less than the wage rate, then what will happen? If Peter hires 5 or more workers, he will be making a loss due to the fact that the cost of one worker exceeds the benefit of hiring that worker. So then the MRP will be less than the wage rate. Then it will not be profitable for him to employ more than 5 workers. Right, let's move on to that is the individual demand for labor. Right now, the market demand for labor, when we look at equilibrium in the labor market, we have to look at the market demand for labor and the market supply for labor. So the market demand for labor is obtained by adding all the individual demand curves together. So the market demand curve will thus have a negative slope, like in your case of the market demand for goods and services. there's an inverse relationship between what? Between the quantity demanded, the demand for labor and the wage rate. So the market demand can be changed if any of the non-wage determinants of labor demand changes. And this will cause a shift of the market demand curve. So what is important in terms of the market demand for labor? You obtain it by adding all the individuals' demand for labor. It depends on how many firms is that in that industry together, and it will have a negative slope. It means that it will slope downwards from left to right, which indicates a negative and inverse relationship between the wage rate and the demand for labor, or the quantity demanded for labor. And if the price of labor changes, the wage rate changes, that will cause a movement along the curve. But if there's a shift in the curve, it can only be shifted by what we call non-wage determinants. It means only a wage, which is the price of labor, can cause a movement along the market demand for labor curve. If the wage rate increase, it will cause an upward movement. If the wage rate decrease, it will cause a downward movement along the market demand for labor curve, like in the case of the goods market. But if there's a shift in the curve, it will only be caused by non-wage determinants. Now, this is very important. What is this non-wage determinants? There can be a change in the number of firms in the market. More firms can enter or exit. A change in the price of the product. A change in the MPP, the productivity of labor, which means there's an increase in the productivity of labor, which means the total output has increased. A new substitute for labor intensive becomes available. So it means that you employ less labor because there's a machine that has been developed that can replace labor. The price of a substitute factor of production changes. So it means that you can employ less labor. It means in terms of capital. So that can cause a shift in the market demand for labor, that you demand less labor. So what we mean by the market demand for labor is the total demand for labor by all firms in that industry or market. So these are the factors, we call it non-wage determinants, or factors that can shift the curve either to the left or to the right. Or the price of a complementary factor of production changes. So it means that what we mean by factor of production: natural resources, capital, entrepreneurship, and labor. So it can mean that the cost of natural resources raw materials can increase or decrease, or the cost of capital can increase or decrease. We talk about interest rate. So yeah, you can go through all of this also on the portal. So this can cause a shift in the curve. So make sure you can understand how each of these can change the market demand of labor. So the market demand for labor curve is downward sloping, like a normal demand curve. And it's inverse, so it's an inverse relationship between the wage, the price of labor, and the quantity demanded for labor. Yeah, so the market supply of labor, the market supply of labor curve, you can see on the horizontal axis, N is the number of workers employed, and W is the wage rate. So the market supply of labor curve will be upward sloping. like a normal supply curve. It indicates positive relationship between the wage rate and the number of workers supplied. So the quantity of labor supplied will increase as the wage rate increases. So it's a positive relationship between the wage rate and the quantity of labor supplied. Now, the quantity of labor supplied is the number of workers. Now, who demands labor is firms, and who supply labor is the workers. That is different from the goods market. Who demands goods and services is consumers, and who supply goods and services are firms. That is a major distinction between the goods market and the labor market. So a change in the market supply curve can only be caused by the non-wage determinants of the supply of labor. So again, the same, if there's a change in the price of labor, in the wage, if there's an increase in the wage rate, it will cause an upward movement along the supply of labor curve. And if there's a decrease in the wage rate, it will cause a downward movement. But if the supply of labor curve either shifts to the right or to the left, it will be caused by non-wage determinants of the supply of labor. So what is this non-wage determinants that can shift the supply of labor curve either to the left or to the right? New workers can enter the market. It means that new entrants come in. There's more workers that have qualified or have, obtained the degrees at tertiary institutions or TVET college or whatever. Number of workers can decrease. There's retrenchments in that industry. Job losses, that can also happen in South Africa's case, especially in the coal mining industry and other industries. And wages that can be earned in other occupation chains. So it means that workers can move from one occupation to another occupation where the wage rate is higher and the benefits is much better. The non-monetary aspects is better. Means that there's housing benefits, housing subsidies, there's medical benefits, that is non-monetary. There's housing benefits, medical benefits, transport, etc. So this can cause the market supply curve to shift either to the left or to the right. So it's more or less the same as the goods market. But here we deal with the labor market specifically. So when we look at the equilibrium in the labor market, it's the same, principle, demand and supply analysis. In the labor market, we have the price of labor on the y-axis, W, and the quantity of labor in on the horizontal axis, the x-axis. And the price of labor is W, and the supply curve represents the supply of labor, upward sloping, and D, the demand for labor, and the quantity of labor is N, number of workers. And now where's equilibrium? The intersection at E in the labor market. And what is the equilibrium wage rate? WE. And what is the equilibrium number of workers employed? NE. So this demand and supply analysis that we have studied in the goods market previously is also applicable to the labor market. But here we talk about wage rate as the price of labor. So this is how equilibrium in the labor market is illustrated graphically. So this is a perfectly competitive labor market and there's no government intervention. Now in the real world, we have government intervention in the labor market. There's the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, and there's the minimum wage that we will deal with now, and other acts that came into being after 94. The Employment Equity Act. So there is government intervention in the labor market. That's why we don't get perfectly competitive labor markets. We get imperfect labor markets in the real world. But we study the perfectly competitive labor market as a basis or foundation to study imperfect labor markets in further studies in microeconomics. So here it's just an illustration what will happen if there are changes in the labor market, in the equilibrium. An increase in the demand for labor will cause a shift to the right. The demand curve for labor will shift from D1 to D2. You start always from the equilibrium. This is the demand for labor, D1. This is the supply for labor, S1. This is the original demand and supply for labor curves. This is the equilibrium. And this is W1, the equilibrium wage rate. Now, if the demand for labor increase, firms demand more labor because there's more demand for goods and services. Well, they will have to, produce more demand, goods and services. Production have to increase. So what will happen then? The demand for labor curve will increase or shift to the right, parallel to D2. So the new point of intersection will be here, where the new demand curve intersects the old supply curve at this point. So what will happen with the wage rate? The wage rate will increase from W1 to W2. And what will happen with the number of workers employed? It will increase from N1. The equilibrium quantity of workers will employ from N1 to N2. So it means that there will be more workers employed because there's a greater demand for labor. And the wage rate will increase. A decrease in the demand for labor will cause a shift, just the opposite, to the right, to the left, and this will cause a decrease in the wage rate. And the number of workers, the equilibrium quantity of workers will also decrease. So what you can do is you can graphically work through these examples and draw the diagrams yourself. That is how you master diagrams, to illustrate changes in the equilibrium of the labor market. Now you can also apply to changes in the equilibrium of the labor market. Apology for that announcement. An increase in the supply of labor will cause a shift of the supply curve to the right. So you can work through this example as well. You will see there will be a decrease in the wage rate. So who supply labor is workers. So if there's an increase in the supply of labor because of there's a greater demand for labor, an increase in the wage rate, more labor will be supplied, and there will be a decrease in the wage rate. Ceteris paribus, the demand for labor remains the same. You can see D remain the same. And changes in the equilibrium of the labor market, if there's a decrease in the supply for labor, the opposite will also be true. The supply curve will shift to the left, and it will increase the wage rate. So you can work through this. You can work through changes in the equilibrium of the labor market. Either an increase in the demand for labor, an increase or decrease in the demand for labor, an increase in the supply of labor, and a decrease in the supply of labor. And what is the impact on the wage rate, the equilibrium wage rate, and what will happen with the curve? Will it shift to the left, to the right? And what will happen with the equilibrium quantity of workers employed? That is very important in terms of changes in the equilibrium of the labor market. Okay, right. Now, just the last part of the labor market is we live in an imperfect labor market environment where there's government intervention, specifically in South Africa's case, which I've mentioned already. We have a minimum wage legislation in South Africa since 2018, where minimum wages have been determined, especially in farm workers and domestic workers. Now, there has been a change in the minimum wage rate from the 1st of March in 2024. You can Google that in terms of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So the minimum wage rate currently per hour is about 27 rand something. That equates to 220 rand per week and 4,400 per month. So you can just Google that. What is the current minimum wage in South Africa? There has been changes since 1st of March 2024. So the government have employed minimum wages to protect the exploitation of certain workers against not a living wage, and to pressure from the trade unions and society. Now, you see the minimum wage. Now, for minimum wage to have an effect on the labor market and to be of benefit to workers, it must be set above the equilibrium wage rate. So if you look at this example here, there is on the y-axis wage rate, the price of labor, the number of workers on the horizontal axis, the demand for labor, downward sloping, an inverse relationship or negative relationship between the wage rate and the quantity of labor demanded. The supply of labor curve, positive relationship between the wage rate and the number of workers supplied. There is the equilibrium, point of intersection. WE is the equilibrium wage rate. NE is the equilibrium quantity of labor employed, where the labor market is in equilibrium in a perfectly competitive labor market. What happens if the government intervenes, like in South Africa's case, and fix a minimum wage above the equilibrium wage? So it is set at WM. You can see here, there's WE, the equilibrium wage rate. It's set at WM. M means minimum. So what effect will it have on the labor market? On the quantity of labor supply and demanded. So WM, you go to that point there where it intersects the demand curve, and you go downward here, downwards, then you will see it's NM. So there's a higher wage. The minimum wage is set above the equilibrium wage. So it means the quantity demanded of labor will fall to NM because the wage rate is higher. So firms will demand less labor, which is actually negative. And that can lead to retrenchments or job losses. It has happened before in the agricultural sector and other sectors in the South African context. What will happen with the supply of labor? WM, you go with that broken line up till the supply curve, and you go downwards with the broken line until the horizontal axis, in the quantity of labor supply will be N1, which means more labor will be supplied. The supply of labor will increase at the minimum wage of WM, which is set always above the equilibrium wage. If it sits below the equilibrium wage, it's not efficient, it's not effective. It will have no effect. It will be useless actually to employ a minimum wage. So a minimum wage will always be set above the equilibrium wage. So if it's set below the equilibrium wage rate, it will have no effect on the wage rate or the level of employment. So this is the imposition of the effect of a minimum wage on the labor market, and this diagram is very, very important. Draw the diagram and see if you can understand the diagram. To master diagrams in economics or in microeconomics, you have to practice these diagrams and understand how this diagram is, what the components of this diagram. Because I've been been dealing with this module since 2007 actually, as a face-to-face tutor that time, and then permanently again, or since 2007, yeah. So yeah, this is a minimum wage in a perfectly competitive market. So a minimum wage rate can be set above the equilibrium wage rate, and then it will be effective. Then the number of the wage rate will increase, and that is what the government objective is. Why will they employ a minimum wage? Because they want the current wage rate is too low. It is not a living wage, and they are pressure from the trade unions and society. So the negative impact of a minimum wage is that the demand for labor will be less, and that can lead to retrenchments and to job losses. And then the government have to intervene again in that way. So sometimes it's not good to employ a minimum wage. But in the South African context, we don't have a choice. Because in some sectors, the wage rate is not good enough. And wage rates have been employed previously in the domestic workers industry and the agricultural sector. So you can, it has started in 2018, yeah. 2018, the first national minimum wage have been implemented. I think it was 24 Rand per hour. Now, currently from the 1st of March 2024, it has been increased by 8.5%. So it is now about 27.85, 27 Rand, 85 cents per hour. That equates to 20 Rand, 22 Rand, or 220 Rand something per per week, and 4,000 something, 4,400 per month. So that is a national minimum wage. You cannot employ workers below that wage. Otherwise, you will be liable for penalty from the Department of Employment and Labor. Okay, this is the end of topic 14, topic 15, sorry. And to summarize, and to go back to the topic outcomes, first slide there, just go back to your module site there and look at the information provided for topic 15 and work through that. That is important. And the additional resources and the topic notes, everything is there. And the learning outcomes. Once you have studied this learning unit, you should be able to explain the supply and demand in a perfectly competitive labor market, and explain the imposition of a minimum wage in a perfectly competitive labor market. So that is all that you need to know in this topic 15, and work through your activities. That is important, and then you will be ready for the assessments. And if you have any questions, raise it in the discussion forum for topic 15, or for the e-tutors discussion forum, and for the lecturers. So I hope you have enjoyed this online lecture session for this topic 15. And I hope you've enjoyed the module for this year. And it will give you a good foundation for next year for macroeconomics 1601. And what is important is in microeconomics to understand economic concepts and the diagrams and the definitions, and what we call the outcomes, and look at the the checklist, what you need to know in terms of topic 15, and the activities. And the e-tutors are ready for you to answer your queries, and the lecturers as well, to support you in to have a successful outcome for this module for 2024. Okay, thank you for attending. The students that could attend, and the online session will be available under the additional resources forum on the module site. Thank you and goodbye.